Good morning and welcome to the August 23rd meeting of the Santa Barbara County Board of Supervisors here in the Santa Maria hearing room. Madam Clerk, will you call the roll, please?
Supervisor Lavanino.
Here.
Supervisor Williams.
Here.
Supervisor Hart.
Here.
Supervisor Nelson.
Here.
And Chair Hartman.
Here. Please stand and join me for the pledge. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next order of business are the minutes from August 16th, 2022. May I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes are adopted. CEO report. CEO Miyasato.
There is a report, but I can't find it on my email for right now, so I will.
We'll go to
Come back
clerk
to it. Thank
announcements and
you.
then you signal to us. Madam Clerk?
Chair Hartman and members of the board, I do have a few announcements this morning. We posted an addendum to today's agenda on Friday, August 19th, amending the agenda to include an additional item on the closed session agenda. The closed session agenda was amended to include conference with legal counsel, existing litigation, paragraph 1 of subdivision D of Government Code section 54956.9, Jeffrey Arlington v. County of Santa Barbara et al., Santa Barbara County Superior Court case number 20 CV 03438. This addendum was posted online and has been made available to the board and the public. Lastly, I would like to remind the public who are participating in our meeting today of the board's updated methods of public participation. For the Board of Supervisors methods of public participation and to provide public comment on general public comment or an item on the board's agenda, please see page 2 of the agenda. Members of the public can attend meetings in person, both in the Santa Barbara Board Hearing Room chambers, as well as the Santa Maria Board Hearing Room chambers. Please note the board is following all local and state guidelines and are no longer requiring face coverings indoors. If you attend the board meeting in person, you will no longer be required to wear a face covering, but please be advised that the Public Health Department is still strongly encouraging all county staff and members of the public to mask and socially distance themselves in crowded areas. I would also like to remind the public that if you require any special accommodations, please contact the clerk of the board to make that request, preferably on the Friday prior to the board meeting. Individuals that would like to provide verbal public comment virtually may do so via Zoom by registering in advance via the link available on page 2. After registering, you will receive a confirmation email containing important information about joining the virtual meeting. Once the chair has announced the item you want to comment on, please join the meeting with the information provided. You will be placed on mute until it is your turn to speak. The clerk will call you by name, and when removed from mute, you will hear a notification that your line has been unmuted. If you are using a touch-tone phone, you may need to press *6 to unmute yourself. Each person may address the board for up to 3 minutes, and this is at the discretion of the chair. If you have any questions, please contact the clerk of the board's office at area code 805-568-2240. Again, that's 805-568-2240. And that concludes my announcements for today.
Thank you, CEO Miyasato.
Chair Hartman and board members, this is just a quick recognition of an award that one of our departments won recently. The county's Climate Change Vulnerability Assessment was selected for the 2022 American Planning Association Award of Excellence for Innovation in Green Community Planning. The assessment was first recognized by the Central Coast chapter of the American Planning Association, winning the local chapter's local award. Its selection at the state level is a significant honor, and we want to congratulate our long-range planning team for achieving this award.
That's extraordinary. And that's it. Turning then to our administrative agenda, I see that Supervisor Nelson has pulled items A3 and A12. Do any other board members have items they would like to pull? And Madam Clerk, any members of the public?
Chair Hartman and members of the board, we have no requests to speak from the public on our administrative agenda.
All right, would you read A3 into the record, please?
Chair Hartman and members of the board, administrative item number 3 is from the Behavioral Wellness Department. It is to consider recommendations regarding a waiver of competition under County Code Section 2-39 for the purchase of pharmaceuticals.
Supervisor Nelson.
Yes, thank you, Chair Hartman. I'm hoping that behavioral wellness staff is available.
Our director is here.
There she is. All right, well, thank you. Ms. Navarro.
Good morning. Morning,
I
Chair.
just had a question on this item. It's a waiver of competition for pharmaceuticals, and this is paid for out of state and federal funds. And I just wanting to have the assurance this doesn't put us any additional audit risk with those funds. I know that's something that we're, as a board, very sensitive to, and so wanted to hear from you.
Yes, today's resolution, we're asking for an extension through December 2022. As you know, staffing challenges in the department. We've had significant vacancy in the contracts department. We are preparing the RFP to be released by the end of this month for a new competitive bid for this pharmaceutical service.
Okay.
To ensure that this proprietor is still, we need to check. They were originally chosen in 2018 as they were the sole source pharmacy that could supply all the medications and drugs most commonly supplied by the PUF.
Thank you.
All right. And Madam Clerk, A12.
Chair Hartman and members of the board, administrative item number 12 is from the Planning and Development Department. It is to consider recommendations regarding an agreement for services with Blue Point Planning for the preparation of a climate change adaptation plan and outreach strategies.
Supervisor Nelson.
Thank you, Chair Hartman. My question, I had a little bit of correspondence with Director Plowman, but I believe she might be on as well. But my concern with this contract is I wanted to just make sure that the board has given sufficient direction on policy wise before moving into this process, and that we have the opportunity to have some updates and maybe direction from the board. And then ultimately, when this comes back to the board, that we have options. Sometimes we get involved in these long range planning exercises, and we finally get a final product that the board hasn't had a lot of discretion and conversation about. So I just want to protect that and make sure that we have the opportunity as a board to weigh in throughout this process. And then at the very end of this process, that we have options of kind of the low, medium, and high. What's the minimum requirement to meet state law? Because I understand the reason why we're going about this in part is to satisfy a state requirement that we update our safety element. And so I just was hoping to get an explanation and some feedback from the director or her staff.
Director Plowman.
Yes, Madam Chair, Supervisor Nelson, and other board members. So we did receive some direction already when we brought the vulnerability assessment that we just talked about that received the award. So we did receive some then, and then there is a point in the process where we will be coming with a draft to the board, and then we will be getting direction from the board at that point in time, and then incorporating the comments then. And then, of course, at our final adoption, we have the board certainly can make comments, and we hear you about options that you're interested in seeing. And also there's a fair amount of public participation and outreach that we're going to be undergoing. We have 9 stakeholder meetings, and then we have 3 small group meetings, and then we have 2 larger public outreach meetings. So there'll be a lot of interaction with the community on it. And we're certainly happy to work with the board and provide options. And certainly I can be updating the board in my regular meetings with them on the progress.
Thank you, Director Plowman. So just so I understand, what has been the direction that the board has given on this? I know that we've asked to go ahead and prepare a climate action adaptation plan, but to me, that sounds like a very broad work project. And so I didn't know if there were some specifics policy that we'd actually had provided here.
So, Madam Chair, Supervisor Nelson, so there was some general discussion when we brought the vulnerability assessment to the board, just about the future direction of the adaptation plan. It wasn't, I wouldn't say that it was robust, but I would say that we did get some direction and some concerns or interests that were expressed by the board at that time.
Okay. Well, that's again where I'm coming from here is I want to make sure that as we enter into these projects, it's, I know that we have stakeholder outreach and whatnot,
Sure.
but the board of supervisors is the ultimate group of stakeholders as we represent all the, 450,000 people of Santa Barbara County. So I think it's really important that we are participants in these long range plans, especially this one. It's going to take a year and a half before we potentially will see some type of update to the general plan here. So what would frustrate me is to go through this process in a year and a half from now, we have a take it or leave it document that the board has, and that we would have to then at that point accept it to comply with state law with the general plan and not have the options. So I just want to make sure that we're protecting the discretion and the policy policy decision-making process of this board. So
Absolutely.
okay.
Understood.
All right. So those are just my questions. Thank you, Chair Hartman.
All right, so that brings us then, I need a motion to approve the balance of the administrative agenda.
So moved. Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It's approved. Now, general public comment, Madam Clerk, do we have anyone who would like to speak on matters not on today's agenda?
Yes, Chair Hartman and members of the board, we have one request to speak on general public comment today, and that is here in Santa Maria. We are going to Dana Howard. Dana?
Yes, good morning, board. My name is Dana Howard. I am the Director of Communications Outreach, Recruitment, and Enrollment for the California Conservation Corps. Now, I know that a few of you have met Mike Anderson, our District Director for San Luis Obispo and for the location here that we have in Santa Maria. And I am headquartered in Sacramento, so I run the recruitment and enrollment statewide for the CCC. And I wanted to just take a quick moment to see if how you could potentially reach out back to us. I'm going to leave with you a folder like this that will go to your staff. Ana Mejia, who is our local recruiter here in Santa Maria, her card is in there along with mine. But I'm hoping that we might be able to find a way to collaborate to be able to reach 18 through 25-year-old adults here in Santa Maria, especially to be able to participate in this statewide program. We're not a company, we're not a nonprofit, we're a state of California department. So we are government, and we run a program, state mandated, to give 18 to 25-year-olds a leg up in getting their career started. We are provide a high school diploma opportunity. We also embrace those who are justice involved, but we are not an at-risk program. So about 20% of our folks have college degrees when they come into the CCC. Most have graduated high school and done some college. But the work and the paid training that they receive, $2,610 per month as a monthly stipend plus health insurance, that paid training that they receive leads to direct and defined career pathways to state organizations like CAL FIRE, Caltrans, state parks. And as well, I'm hopeful that it can lead to direct career pathways with county and city governments, as well, as we all strive to be able to improve the diversity and equity inclusion in our own staff and hiring. We believe that the California Conservation Corps is just a huge opportunity to do that, because we are an extremely inclusive organization and program, giving paid training to those, get them ready for the workforce. So if there is any plea that I can make today is to be able to work with myself and with the California Conservation Corps to figure out ways that we can bring young adults, especially here in the Santa Maria area, to the Santa Maria Center. Now, with that said, we also have fire programs to the south of you and to the north of you, one in San Luis Obispo and one in Camarillo and Ventura County. I realize they are outside of your counties, but they are receiving fire training that can spell right back into your own local county fire suppression and fire departments, and to bring that diversity into the program. We are really striving to get to a 50% level with women doing wildland firefighting. And we believe that the California Conservation Corps has that opportunity to increase women both in the state fire departments and with county and local fire departments. So please, if you can give me some direction of who to reach out to and how to do that, we would be most appreciative. Thank you.
Supervisor Nelson.
Yes, thank you, Chair Hartman. Thank you, Mr. Howard, for being here. I was one of those supervisors that got a tour from Mr. Anderson at the Santa Maria location that the city of Santa Maria has donated and made available. And so it's a really exciting program. And I want to thank you for being here and reminding all of us that this is something that's really important out there. I heard that you said that it's not an at-risk program, but at the same time, when you're, willing to have justice involve youth and whatnot, it does seem like it have some nexus there. One of the groups that the county is really trying to focus on is our transitional age youth that are coming out of foster care. And so I don't know if there's already a relationship there with social services that we can help to move along and connect, because it does seem like this is the type of focus that could help some of those young men and women that are coming out of the foster care system that don't necessarily have the same connections that somebody that's coming from a more traditional family might have. And so would love to help to try to make that possible for you, as well as the rest of the general population of the Santa Maria Valley and Santa Barbara County.
Great, that would be extremely helpful because we do have some relationship, but we most certainly could make that stronger.
CEO Miyasato, do you have any suggestions?
I was going to say, Anna can contact our office and we can work out and figure out who the contacts would be, just so you can have one point of contact. There's a lot, I'm sure, of people who'll be interested and wanting to participate. And so we'll do our best. So we'll reach out after the meeting.
Very good.
Thank you.
All right, thank you all.
Thank you for being here.
All right.
Departmental item number 1, Madam Clerk, would you read that into the record, please?
Chair Hartman and members of the board, departmental item number 1 is from the Planning and Development Department, and it is a hearing to consider the withdrawal of the project regarding the wholesale rezone and tentative track map rezone 15 RZN 4 and tentative track map 15 TRM 11. And again, I would just like to note for the record that this is on your agenda. The department is requesting a withdrawal of this item today.
Director Plowman?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Yes. Hi, I do have Ms. Shannon Reese. She's the planner on this case, and she's going to explain the circumstances to you.
Thank you. Ms. Reese?
Thank you, Madam Chair, Director Plowman. So at this time, the applicant doesn't have a current preliminary can and will serve letter or proof of supplemental water to demonstrate adequate services in the Orchid planning area. And therefore, the project is currently inconsistent with a few Orchid community plan requirements that have to be complied with prior to discretionary action. And we can't make the findings for approval at this point. So that's why we're proposing to remove the item from the agenda. And the applicant did not provide a hearing date for continuance. I don't believe that the applicant team is in attendance remotely. Perhaps they're there in the hearing room, but they might be able to speak further, and staff is available for any questions about the removal.
Thank you. Supervisor Nelson?
Yes, thank you. This is in my district. And I got a chance to talk to the applicant about the development standards in our community plan. That is a bit of a headache for this project. And there's been some back and forth and some interpretation issues that I'm working with county council to see if we can resolve. It would be my preference that we actually just continued it for potentially to the next Santa Maria meeting in a month, 4 weeks from now. And at that time, if we're not able to resolve those issues, then we could move forward with the withdrawal. But at this point, I think I don't want to get them back to square zero. We all know what the process is to get back onto a board hearing is. And while these hurdles may be a little bit large right now, I'm hopeful that in the next couple of weeks that staff can work with council and Golden State Water to resolve those issues so that we might be able to have this item here sooner than later.
Let me start with county council and then with P&D just to make sure that would work and date certain.
Madam Chair, yes, that would work for county council.
Ms. Reese, Director Plowman?
Madam Chair, I think that's fine for the department.
So then it would be a continuation till September 20th. Would you like to make that motion?
Yes, thank you,
Oh,
Chair.
I'm sorry. I forgot public comment. Madam Clerk.
Chair Hartman and members of the board, we had no requests to speak on this item.
Okay, Supervisor Nelson.
All right, thank you, Chair Hartman, and thank you, staff, for indulging me on this. So I'll make a motion that we continue department item number 1 to September 20th here in in Santa Maria hearing.
I'll second that.
And all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Turning to item number 2 in our agenda, Madam Clerk.
Chair Hartman and members of the board, departmental item number 2 is from the treasurer, tax collector, public administrator. It is a hearing to consider recommendations regarding the California Enterprise Development Authority CADA issuance of tax exempt and or taxable revenue obligations for the benefit of Dunn School.
Good morning, Mr. Hagan.
Good morning. This item before you today is a TEFRA hearing, which stands for Tax Equity and Fiscal Responsibility Act of 1982. Section 147F of the Internal Revenue Code provides the pathway for qualified 501c3 organizations to access the municipal markets. In this case, it is Dunn School that has made the recommendation. And the issuer would be CEDA, the California Enterprise Development Authority, in an amount not to exceed $5.5 million. It is an item that the DAC heard on July 29th and approved for recommendation to your board. And we have members from Dunn School. I believe it is Chad Stacy, the CFO, and then Sam Balassi, who is from Kutak Rock. Your responsibility, and if I step on your toes, Rachel, please stop me, is to approve the issuance and hold the public hearing. And so the public hearing is demonstrating there is the public benefit for this project. And the county is not the issuer. Again, it's CEDA. So we have no obligation, either legal or moral, for the repayment of these issues. And that concludes my opening presentation. And if you have questions, like I said, there are members from Dunn and Kutak Rock that are available on Zoom.
And do any board members have questions? Supervisor Nelson.
Yes, thank you, Chair Hartman. So, and I do support and see there's public benefit here as an uncle of 2 earwigs. So would we have the ability, if we didn't see there's a nexus there, that would be the chance for this board to, hear from public that there wasn't public benefit, and then we'd make that finding, and then it would stop. I'm just kind of curious because it is a little odd relationship that we have here with this process, again, not being responsible for these funds beyond this hearing.
Yeah, Supervisor Nelson, through the chair. And so you are conducting the public hearing because the project is in our jurisdiction. And I guess you could make that finding and
that would stop the process at that point. I'm just kind of curious on process. I was trying to explain this to my staff yesterday, and I was a little, I had difficulty. So I was just trying to understand exactly what influence we have in this process moving forward.
Yeah, Chair Nelson through the chair, or Supervisor Nelson through the chair. I've done about 20 of these. I've never had one not go through. So that's kind of uncharted territory for me, to be honest with you.
I assume it's a ministerial act, but I guess we'd have to turn to our county council.
Madam Chair, members of the board, I'm not sure either. But I can take a look at that if you'd like to have that answer prior to
the purpose of
taking a
this hearing,
vote.
it's a moot case. Obviously, since it is, at least for this supervisor, it does meet the, the necessity of public benefit. So I can do some research offline on it.
And we can follow up with you as well.
Thank you.
And I'd like to know if anyone from Dunn School would like to make some comments. It is in the 3rd district, and as Supervisor Nelson has alluded, it's a treasure in our community. We're so glad to have it. But if anybody from Dunn would like to speak up. So nobody's rushing to chime.
This is Sam Balassi. I don't know if you can hear me.
Absolutely, we can, loud and clear.
Okay, great. So this is Sam Balsi from QTAC, and I can, if I can take a minute, I'm happy to address the earlier question from the supervisor.
Please.
Yeah, no, I would like to make things as kind of simple as possible. So the Internal Revenue Code sets up a procedure that requires a public hearing prior to the issuance of tax exempt bonds that benefit a certain categories of projects. You have them for multifamily housing, you have them for 501c3 organizations, and that's what this that's what this process it really is. It's to consider the issuance of tax exempt debt for the benefit of a nonprofit, and the board has gracefully done that before in past for other projects that CETA has brought to the county. And I suspect also you've done numerous public hearings for low and moderate income housing, that has been within the county's jurisdiction. So it's a requirement, and it is somewhat ministerial, but it does give the board the opportunity to consider the project and the applicant and so forth. I think as been expressed, most of the TEFRA hearings are somewhat routine, if you will, because the projects have been generally vetted. This project has to receive the approvals for the improvements that they're going to complete on the project. So while it's fairly routine, the board sort of still does retain discretion if it doesn't like a particular project not to approve it at a public hearing. But consistently, I think for projects, I think in our experience and up and down the state, TEFRA hearings are fairly routine, and the projects are routinely approved. And I know the Dunn School is appreciative. I know Chad, I don't know if Chad is there, maybe he's having some technical difficulties, but they're continuing to make improvements. A large component of this project would be to enhance the wastewater treatment system that they have on the property, and then refurbish buildings and so forth. So it's further enhancements to the campus.
Thank you both for that explanation of the project and the process.
You're welcome.
Madam Clerk, any public comment on this matter?
Chair Hartman and members of the board, we have no requests to speak on this item.
May I have a motion to approve?
I move approval.
A second? All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Item number 3, Madam
Thank
Clerk.
you.
Thank you.
Chair Hartman and members of the board, departmental item number 3 is from the Social Services Department. It is a hearing to consider recommendations regarding home delivery of meals to seniors and disabled in Santa Barbara County.
Good morning, Mr. Nielsen.
Good morning. Could I have the slides up, please? Great, thank you. Good morning, Chair Hartman and supervisors. I am Daniel Nielsen, your Director of the Department of Social Services and your Interim Director of the Public Health Department. With me today is Mark Contois, the Division Chief over the In-Home Supportive Services and Adult Protective Services programs, and the person primarily responsible for gathering the information that I'm going to share with you today. In December of 2020, I became involved in your board's efforts to provide bridge funding to the organizations in the county that were providing home delivered meals to seniors and the disabled, some of whom had communicated to your board that they had been severely impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. At that time, your board provided a total of $200,000 to assist programs in need for a 2-month period of time, and my department facilitated the dispersal of those monies to assist programs who could meet minimal documentation requirements. Since early 2021, multiple providers of senior nutrition have approached board members individually or the board as a whole to ask for financial assistance. The purpose of my presentation today is simply to educate your board at a summary level on the services currently being provided by the 9 nonprofit meal delivery providers in the county, as well as other associated providers. It is my hope that this information will empower you with a general understanding of those providing services and those being served. To gather this information, we created a survey to elicit the number of people being served, any eligibility criteria for participation, the use of paid versus volunteer drivers, the cost per meal of each provider, how the programs were financially supported, and the number of meals being provided each week. Mr. Contreras then proceeded to engage the executive leadership of each program in order to obtain as complete and accurate information as possible. When looking at the current array of services being provided and the size of the population being served, it is important to recognize that the COVID pandemic changed the landscape in meal delivery to seniors and the disabled. Prior to the pandemic, home deliveries were focused on people who had limitations, making it difficult for them to leave their homes to go to a congregate meal site at a senior center or to obtain food from a grocery store and prepare it themselves. Not only did COVID shut down congregate meal sites, the pandemic caused seniors and the disabled to be cautioned to stay home and not venture out to restaurants or grocery stores. And the programs serving those populations did everything they could to meet this increased need. The current public health emergency has been extended to October 13th, 2022, and it is likely to be extended again as the 60-day notice promised prior to being lifted at the federal level has not occurred as of this time. We identified 9 nonprofits in the county that are providing home delivered meals to seniors and the disabled. They vary in terms of how many times per week they deliver, how many meals per week they provide, whether they deliver hot meals, bagged meals, or refrigerated meals, what their suggested donation is per meal from the clients, whether they use paid or volunteer drivers, how they fundraise, how they obtain their food, what geographic areas they serve, and how they identify who is eligible for their services. The following 5 slides summarize some of this information. Table 1 shows that there are 2,419 clients being served with 8,850 meals per week. And some of those meals are hot, some refrigerated, and some bagged. Please keep in mind that these numbers are not static and they vary from week to week. Table 2 shows the range of costs per meal and the range of suggested donation by recipient. The cost per meal is impacted by whether or not volunteer drivers are used, whether or not the administration of the program is volunteer or paid, whether the meals are purchased or prepared by the provider, and other factors. Table 3 shows the sources of funds as best we could ascertain, as this information was provided verbally by the providers. You can see in Table 3 that a little over 1/3 of the total funds obtained to support the programs are coming from fundraising and charitable donations and unspecified sources. Table 4 shows that 5 of the programs obtain their meals from a contracted provider, while 4 of the programs prepare the meals themselves. 1 program uses paid drivers exclusively, 5 programs use volunteer drivers exclusively, and 3 programs use a combination of both. This slide shows the level of general fund support in the current year to 4 of the programs by way of the Human Services Commission and an action stemming from the June 14th budget hearings. This slide shows the level of support requested and awarded from Community Development Block Grant funds. And this slide shows the general fund contribution that flows through the Department of Social Services to the Area Agency on Aging as the local match for their federal Older American Act funding. All totaled in the current fiscal year, the county is contributing $166,974 to 6 programs as listed on this and the prior 2 slides. The revenues previously shared do not capture several things, including the value of volunteer staff, volunteer drivers, donated food, and other non-monetary supports that keep the programs operating. It is important to highlight that the Food Bank of Santa Barbara County provides fresh produce, dairy, and other foods on a countywide basis, including to some of the organizations providing home delivered meals. Also, the Wisdom Center, which is a for-profit licensed healthcare facility, provides many services to their clients, including meals at their site, as well as home delivered meals. While our initial focus in conducting our survey in order to make this presentation was on the providers, we soon recognized that you would not have a complete picture of home delivered meal services without spending a moment focused on some of the challenges faced by the recipients of these services. Some of the recipients have an inability to manage food that is intended to be consumed over several days due to their refrigeration capacity, lack of appliances for warming food, and cognitive or physical limitations in remembering or being able to prepare the food for consumption. Further, just like all of us, recipients have certain foods that they like, certain foods that they will tolerate, and certain foods that they won't eat. If the meals are not consumed in their entirety, the nutritional value intended for the recipient is diminished. Lastly, prior to COVID, an important part of the home delivered meals program was the regular interaction with the drivers delivering the meals. With the onset of COVID, some programs shifted to delivering more meals at a time and less frequently, which meant that the deliveries were occurring maybe once a week or once every other week instead of 3 or 4 days a week. And some programs shifted to dropping off meals on the person's porch rather than having direct contact with the recipient in order to avoid any health concerns for the recipient or the driver. I want to point out that while we did not find long waiting lists with the programs, and there was only one program that had a short waiting list, that was not the case in January of 2021 when I was acting on behalf of your board, dispersing that $200,000 to the programs. And at that time, there were quite a few programs that had long waiting lists, and the money that you provided caused those to be taken care of. So there's a great volatility over time, depending upon the current funding of the programs, as well as the number of people that are raising their hands saying that they are in need. The eventual lifting of the public health emergency will impact some of the programs in terms of who they are able to utilize their funds to continue to serve at home. Currently, the public health emergency allows for federal funds to be used for people to be served in their homes without any limitations on their abilities at home. And so once the public health emergency gets lifted, those people would have to return to receiving their meals at a congregate meal site. However, it is not known at this time if the previously established congregate meal sites will be able to be reestablished in the same numbers and at the same locations. It is important to understand that some of those currently served by home delivery do not have deficits in the activities of daily living and would not be eligible for ongoing home delivery, but they also have transportation issues and they have other barriers in terms of accessing congregate meal sites. So just because they would be eligible to go to a congregate meal site does not mean that they would necessarily be able to get there. In conclusion, the COVID pandemic has reshaped the structure of many programs that provide meals to seniors and the disabled in our community. The good news is that many of the programs in operation prior to the pandemic have been able to be resilient in adapting to drastically changed circumstances, and there are not significant waiting lists for services. However, what future operations look like post-pandemic and post the federal public health emergency remains to be seen. It is clear that our county is benefiting from a significant level of investment on the part of nonprofit programs that deliver meals in one form or another, the food bank, and other providers. Those working for and volunteering with all of these organizations are passionate and committed. and I'm happy to take your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Nielsen. Questions from the board? Supervisor Lavanino.
Thank you. I really appreciate the report. It's been frustrating. Seems like every year at budget time, we get these last minute requests, and while they are obviously we all want to make sure that any senior disabled individual out there is receiving a meal if they want it. And the numbers are, I don't want to say they're insignificant dollar wise, but for the county, it's not that much money. It's just, I want to make sure that it's going in the right place and being spent wisely. So got a few questions. I really appreciate you bringing this because it kind of gives us the macro level view of this. So who, you don't need to name them, but the ones that didn't respond, are they significant players in the piece of this? I mean, are we missing?
No, Supervisor, through the chair, we're not missing. We were, Mr. Contois was able to make contact with all of the programs. There were a couple of the programs where we were not able to get as much of the information we were seeking as others. And that's why the numbers in the charts represent a kind of like in that neighborhood reality rather than precise.
Right.
But we should be in the ballpark.
Okay. So I guess my biggest question is, what significant, or did you find significant gaps that we could develop a strategy around that's not just writing a check, but what did we really find that was missing that we're not addressing? That was kind of the missing piece for me, was what was the takeaway? I see that we're doing a great job of this, and there's people out there, there's a lot of groups that are working on this, but what is the takeaway of what's missing that we can provide?
Supervisor Lavanino, through the chair, I've been struggling with that question for many years, especially the past 2 years since dealing with that $200,000.
Right.
In my prior county, as part of my agency, I had the AAA, I had the Area Agency on Aging as part of my agency, and we provided the home delivered meals and the congregate meals to the entire county. And so the model we have in this county of multiple providers, now we found at the current time 9 nonprofits doing this. At the time I was dealing with the COVID related money, that there was 11. So there's been some fluctuation. As you know, the Area Agency on Aging lost their contracted provider and took over doing it themselves, and are in the process of looking for a new contracted provider. So this array of multiple providers throughout the county is a positive in the sense that there are very committed people to serving those parts of their community, in doing volunteer work, driving, raising money. But then, it becomes, as I ponder it, I look at, well, they all rely on fundraising. They all rely on donations from the people they're serving. And so when those monies go down and the need goes up, then there's a gap, right?
Okay.
And so that's a gap that they all struggle. And I was impressed that currently, basically, there are no waiting lists other than in one program, and those are pretty much resolved within a week or two of when the people identify themselves. But they each have, their different models of how they obtain food and how they provide it, and and then some of the programs have other additional services in addition to food that they provide to the people they're serving. So it's really hard to answer the question of what's the gap. I mean, the obvious gap on an ongoing basis is money, or the consistent flow of money. But in terms of structure, they each have their own unique structure.
Well, and I don't want to step in and try to take that over either. I mean, I think, these groups are doing an outstanding job. The fact that there's not a waiting list leads us to that conclusion. And I was also impressed with the wide range of sources for income as well. So federal, state, local, charity, donations, and the actual people with the meals, some of them providing money too. So, okay, well, I feel better about the fact that, we've delved into this, we've looked at it. I'm not sure that there's a model that would work better than what we currently have. And I'm okay with at our funding level right now of what we provide when we need to provide it. And I guess that's what we are, is the backstop when it hits the fan, right? So I appreciate the report. I guess there is no silver bullet that says, okay, if we did X, everything would be a lot better, but I think this gave me what I was looking for. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor.
Supervisor Williams.
Well, I mean, I think I'm probably okay if this is, if the funding level was as it is today using this model, but I would say that I'm very uncomfortable expanding it without some kind of criteria or process, right? I mean, essentially, we are funding the programs that we know and that come to us without any kind of competitive process, without any criteria of what the cost is supposed to be, and I think us chipping in a little bit here and there is fine. But I think what is ultimately going to be asked of us is probably something more than that. And if that's the case, then we should be setting up something. Either, I mean, one would be a competitive RFP process where you go, okay, who can give it to us, and provide this service for the least cost. Or B, some criteria of, what's served and under what cost. I guess that would be another option. So A would be a competitive process. B would be a criteria based. C would be, we just say, look, we're willing to spend this much money and we're willing to put 50 cents, chip in 50 cents or 30 cents per meal. And we'll give it to anybody who can provide it at that amount. But I figure we got to do one of those three if we're going to expand our participation.
Supervisor Nelson.
Yes, thank you, Chair Hartman. And to respond to, I have two comments. One is about this, what's that formula look like? And I think Supervisor Williams is on to something there. I think there's a baseline that needs to be provided for. And, there are options out there that are obviously lower costs, right? I mean, if it goes from $3.50 to $15, there's a huge array there. There's a lot of meal services now. Refrigerated meals can be delivered to your door from a UPS driver or a US postal driver to meet those minimum requirements. And so, making sure if we do kind of create that funding formula, like how many people in each of these programs meet the criteria that they couldn't do this on their own, kind of as a census initially, because there are obviously some that don't need a subsidy, but are still taking Meals on Wheels. And I use that as a broad term. And so those that are actually a part of our safety net that we need to make sure that we're caring for, which ones are those initially? And then what is the minimum level of service that we as a county should be providing to them to make sure that it's humane. And so, and then if the service wants to go above that and wants to make sure that it's fresh, it's more fresh, and they want to use that as their kind of their baseline to enhance services to their community, that seems like that would be something well worth doing and something that could give a lot of value to the volunteer groups. The one other point, though, I think that we don't capture here with dollars and cents is that when these are delivered in person by another human being, this is sometimes the only contact that some of our seniors have. And that's the other part that's kind of odd here. If we're having something delivered up by a postal worker, there's no contact there. There's just a drop off on a door. There's no check for welfare if there's an issue that needs to be looked after. And then, a lot of these shut-ins, they crave that human contact. And so it's really important to their mental health and physical health to have that. So I know that's really hard to quantify. I do think there's some value there that we need to, at some point in that process, recognize if they're, because otherwise we're going to need to do a lot more, welfare checks in other ways. So this actually fills a need that sometimes our adult protective services or our law enforcement has to do, is because we have these men and women out there serving our seniors that are, vulnerable. So that's just another piece that should be considered in the long run if we look at something that's formulaic.
Supervisor Hart.
Well, the thing that strikes me with the presentation is how small the county's financial contribution is to this whole system. I think, our discretionary dollars are 5% of the total amount that's being generated privately by the organizations and the fundraising efforts, and then the state and federal funds. So it's an enormously effective program from the county's.
Could I follow on that? Does this include the Human Services Commission grants?
Yes, Chair Hartman, that there was the one chart
is-
that had the awards that are made by them.
Okay. Thank you for allowing me to
No,
insert
right.
that question.
So I'm not sure what our 5% gets us at the table. There obviously may be gaps that we could look at filling with additional resources, but changing what this very effective system is doing seems a little bit dangerous.
Could I jump in? I think the fact that there aren't waiting lists isn't a good indicator of whether there's need or not. I believe that these programs, I can speak for the Buellton Senior Center, they'll by hook or crook find some way, but you can't imagine the cost administratively, psychologically to the organizations having to scramble for funding, having to, go to the city, go to the donors, that they'll do anything, but they have to spend a lot of time raising money when they would rather be doing things like they have a phone system to check on people, getting out there. So unlike others, I think we don't have a system that's working very well. I think we have to think about COVID and the system short term and then longer term. The organization that we had that was overseeing it said, we can't afford to do this anymore. That should be some signal to us. There are real issues here. And while I would never want to interfere with how intensely these 9 organizations are committed to this, I really think we need some broader overarching criteria or structure for this. I know the food bank is very much involved. At some point, they would like to have a bigger kitchen. Long term, they could provide some of these meals, perhaps. I think there's community partners in caring that does transportation. They could be enlisted. We may have community paramedicine. So I think this is something that we really need to think about in a bigger context for where we're heading on this and how we coordinate the system better. I realize it's easy to say, well, we give our little bit and we're done, but this is fundamental to the county social safety net. And so I think at least interim, I like Supervisor Williams that we give a certain amount per meal but longer term, I really believe we have to work with the community partners and figure out or have somebody figure out a better, more comprehensive strategy, because I mean, let me go back to the Buellton Senior Center. They didn't get funded this year, and they didn't get funded through the grant process. And so we were able to get the money through each board member having some to allocate, but they were thinking they'd have to sell their building. They were desperate, and I suspect they're not the only ones. So we'll open it up for public comment, but after Supervisor Lavanino.
Well, let's get the public comment because mine's no longer a question. Mine's more discussions.
Madam Clerk.
Chair Hartman and members of the board, we do have one request to speak on this item, and we are going to remain here in Santa Maria for Howard Green. Howard?
Thank you for your giving this great assignment to Mr. Nelson. And I was pleased listening to last week's meeting that he now also has involvement with the health side of the county. And when I looked at the website of the county, meals and food and nutrition seem to really straddle those two. There was a point in time, I think, that the sheriff had a kitchen that was used, and there was also a time that the school district had a kitchen that was used for preparing some of the meals. My reason for being here is as a professional planner, looking ahead, contingency plans. I mean, I think we all know there's a contingency that the emergency will end. We don't know when. And so what I would hope there could be a concerted effort to lay out for the whole county, really, what operations right now have been suspended and how will the county restore them. So I am looking really ahead. There are facilities that I'm familiar with in the city of Santa Barbara, where I live, that are closed right now. There's a huge fence around the Davis Center right in downtown. I guess the lawn bowlers can go, but the other activities there are not. So it would seem like both the cities and the county need to lay out for all departments what the stage plan is. When the announcement is 30, 60, 90 days away, what will happen 60 days in, 30 days in, and have, in essence, 2 or 3 contingency plans. I don't know what they might all be. Kitchens might be a contingency. Providers, transporters, servers. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that concludes public comment on this item.
Supervisor Lavanito.
Thank you. I think it's important for us to keep the open line of communication with the 9 organizations that are doing this right now. And the Buellton Senior Center, outstanding organization. All of these, though, I bet if you went to them, do not want to give up this portion of their deal, because for them, while we do say it's tough to fundraise, there are things that are harder to fundraise for than others. Fundraising for providing meals to seniors who are in their homes would seem like one of those easy asks that many of these organizations may use that as part of the fuel to fund some of the other portions of their work. So I don't want to come in and step in and say, hey, and I don't think that's what you're asking for, but setting up criteria, and especially as Greg said, we're a small piece of the financial puzzle. And right now, and I guess what I'm hearing is we want to become a bigger piece of the puzzle. I'm not sure I want to be a bigger piece of the financial puzzle. I just want to make sure the job's getting done. I don't necessarily think we as the county need to do it. If it's providing a set dollar amount per meal, then I guess we do have to come up with criteria that says, well, how much is that meal going to cost? So I guess this opened up a lot more questions than it provided answers for, but that's right. That's how we get to the final stage of where we want to get. We all have the same idea. We all want to make sure every senior and disabled person that's in this county is getting the meal that when they need it. So how we go about doing that, I guess, is the big thing. But I don't want to get all involved in over governmentalizing this, where, you know, everybody's got to fill out an application, and, you know, there has to be criteria, and then, you know, this is probably the wrong community for that. And maybe the paperwork side of it has to be done by the organizations and not the individuals. And then we provide funding to the organizations. But the question I guess we have to ask ourselves fundamentally, is this working or isn't it working? And I don't know how we know it's not working if we don't have the lists. So if there's not a waiting list, what's the other way to figure out if it's working outside of we just, you know individuals that aren't getting the support? I guess that's a way. My neighborhood, I see many individuals in my block getting meals delivered. But I just don't, I don't want to be the person that comes in and tries to take this over. I think that's a big mistake. I look at other ways where we provide funding for organizations like library funding and try to come up with things that make everybody happy. It generally is very difficult work to do. So I think it'd be interesting, though, to get feedback from the 9 organizations of how they see our role in this outside of writing a check.
Well, I'll jump in just with a little more background. I guess it was 50 years ago that the Meals on Wheels program was actually created by the federal government, which funds about 1/3 of it. Just last week, the first National Meals on Wheels conference took place in Baltimore after COVID. And they were really mapping out Meals on Wheels and what it looks like now and how it's evolved. And I think they're finding the same thing we're finding here, that needs and things have changed. One thing is seniors and pets, especially during COVID. Many of them need pet food because that's their companionship, and that's really important for their social and mental well-being. Another thing, which we've already talked about, they found that health and checking in on people, having a way to just make sure that they're okay, that is something that really needs to be woven into this program in making sure that it's getting done. And the cost of meals, the cost of food, we know from inflation, making sure that they're balanced meals. So all of these are, and then the transportation, DoorDash, the kind of technological, but then that's not the human. So I agree that we don't want to take it over, but from my perspective, if we could provide some certainty, because that is, at least in the short term, to have these 9 organizations have to struggle so much to raise money and submit the grant applications. I mean, that can't be any more difficult than an RFP or a set fee, a set amount that we give per meal. But I think short term, we want to provide some financial support. Long term, I think we would like to see some organization develop a better framework so that we have certainty that these needs are being met. We don't have to do it, but I would certainly be happy to fund somebody to do it so that I have that certainty. Supervisor Williams.
Yeah, I think that's I think the reason why I'm maybe coming up with something that was bigger is because the reason why we're here is because we were being asked during COVID for a significant increase in, say with 6 zeros behind it, increase in our level of participation. And so, I'm okay, it's not my desire at all to micromanage their operations. And if this is what they're going to do and they're going to continue doing it at this scale, and all that's required from us is 167,000 or 168,000. I don't need us to do anything different. But if this need that was acute during COVID continues or demographically is the trend, then I'm just saying we ought to have some way of doing it fairly, so that some areas of the county might get services easier than others, or some areas of the county have the organizations and don't, or some groups know about us and some don't. So I think that's sort of why I think of the 3 criteria, probably the simplest would be some kind of per meal offer. That way, if an organization has the capacity to do a nicer meal, we're not penalizing them for that, but we're trying to hit at the basics and provide a service that is conceivably could be countywide.
I have a question for Mr. Nielsen. What is the Area Agency on Aging? I mean, could they do this?
Chair Hartman, the Area Agency on Aging, in theory, if there were no other providers in the county besides the Area Agency on Aging, they would, in theory, be able to address the entire county with the necessary level of funding. And so their prior contract that they had, the ask at that time, I think, was for, I can't remember, 500,000, 600,000 ongoing. I can't remember from a couple of years ago when the contractor said we can't keep doing this anymore without significant ongoing county support, so that we don't have to keep doing that level of fundraising. So, we have our match of local funds that goes to the AAA to match the Older American Act funding they received. But if there were no other providers in the county, they would have a very long waiting list. I'm not sure how long, because it would depend on how much the financial support going to these other programs shifted to them.
My question is more the organization of the existing 9 or more
Oh, I see.
entities, not would they provide the.
Okay, yeah, sure. I'm sorry. I misheard you. So Chair Hartman, I would not be able to speculate. I mean, in theory, any organization could play the orchestra leader over, but it would require the cooperation of all those other 8 entities to be willing to do that. And so I think that the question that Supervisor Lavanino asked earlier in terms of, what is it that they want from the county beyond money, would be a very interesting question to have an answer to kind of gauge their perspective of willingness for not necessarily oversight, but coordination or something like that.
So that may be a first step. Supervisor Hart?
Yeah, I do think that's the only first step, is to ask the providers that are doing 95% of the work what they could use in the way of help.
I see a lot of nodding. Can we put that into a motion? We have to receive and file and provide direction. And so
I guess I'd make a motion to have staff reach out to the nonprofit organizations that are providing meals for seniors and disabled people in Santa Barbara County, to ask them how they would be interested in partnering with the county to help their work.
And I think that would include the food bank, which is engaged in providing food to these 9 organizations.
And can I just ask a clarifying question to make sure? Is that like just broadly, or is that non-financially?
I think broadly.
Okay.
And they're obviously going to say financial support, but maybe the qualitative aspect of it is really important to that conversation too.
Okay, thank you.
Can I?
Of course.
I think I like broad, but I think if we do broad, we're going to get back the one thing, and that's going to be like, I need an extra $100,000 a year. So I think in the scope of it, we know the answer is money. So let's kind of take that out of it. And I think maybe saying, outside of financial, or prioritize it, I guess, maybe, because that's going to be the number one answer we're going to get from everybody is, oh, this is an ask from the county. How much money do we need to do it again next year? And I just kind of want to make sure either we have staff ask it in a manner that we already know what the number one answer is. We'd really like to know better, like, how do we better, is there a way to, what do you need from us outside of a paycheck, I guess.
And it may be not just from us, but what is it that you need going forward? And we might develop a set of questions, not just one question.
So I'm curious, is there a working group from all these 9, or do they talk to each other, or how does this work?
Supervisor Levin, through the chair, no.
Supervisor Williams.
I just ask that if we're making talking to folks, that we also talk to the entities that were providing it that are no longer, because there's several of those
CAC.
too.
Yeah.
I mean, there's one down in Carpinteria too, Carpinteria Children's Project, so, but the CAC and but I think I would hope that we're going to do something nuanced, because I think where we started this was when they were pooling their ask to us. And how that was asked of them was, how much money do you need? Right. And then that's that. So, and I guess my point is, that's not a good way for us to fund something, to just ask people, how much money do you need? So I think, I think Daniel understands that it's more nuanced than that, but figuring out maybe more what system they would want for help is just as important as asking them what do they need.
Mr. Nielsen, could you, I mean, can you do this, or can Mr. Conrades can the department do this, and what?
Chair Hartman, yes, we can do this. My department does not have any services or any funding related to senior nutrition, but I volunteered back during the pandemic to deal with 200,000 because of my prior experience in my prior county of understanding these operations, and was happy and actually anxious to do this survey this time and to come share the information, because Supervisor Lavanino made me feel very satisfied in his comment about having more questions now than he did before, because that's how I feel as I continually struggle with, what's the path forward, or what ideas to have. So I'm perfectly happy to craft it's going to be different this time. I would do a written survey that would go to the directors of each of the organizations, asking them 3 or 4 questions, open-ended, to elicit from them their perspective about what they need or what they would like to see in terms of partnership with the county or other entities, and then bring that information back, and I can submit a written report to your board, or I can bring it back in open session to share that and say, here's what they say they need in terms of other, I mean, we can certainly ask, like money can be on there. It sounds like that's a desire, but the focus, the thing that we'll be interested by is the other stuff.
Yeah, and I think, short term during COVID emergency, and then longer term, what are their needs? Where are we heading? What are new needs? Again, like the pet food or health check-ins. I mean, I think trying to get a broader sense of how different organizations are addressing these needs would be helpful.
So I am happy to create that survey with the help of my staff and to get that sent out and to bring back the information. I think Assistant CEO Masnisic would probably want to make a comment in terms of long-term, where this would live related to any potential funding in the future.
Yes, thank you. Just as a reminder, of the funding that was allocated to assist us in doing this work was through ARPA. And we did have the 600,000 dedicated. And that funding actually needs to be obligated by December 2024 and spent by December of 2026. So I imagine we could do the surveying, the convening, come back with a report, and then also look at the current metrics used by the Human Services Commission to evaluate the funding that they currently provide to the agencies that have listed here, so that we can glean anything from that process as well.
So you would be working with the department and Mr. Contois in this process. Supervisor Hart, your light?
Yeah, I just thought that your last comment was really appropriate because I think we're taking the opportunity to recognize that we really benefit from an amazing array of nonprofit organizations that are doing incredible work that organically has developed over time with a lot of passion and a lot of expertise. And we're trying to say to them, we want you to continue. We want to support you in ways to allow you to continue your work and expand. And the needs are going to be different from organization to organization, depending on their leadership and their level of enthusiasm. But we also want to kind of look around the corner and see what are emerging needs. Obviously, older residents are a growing demographic that have different needs, and that we'd like to understand some of those better to be positioned in the future to address those as the opportunity presents itself.
So I think we don't have a second yet, but the motion is then to receive and file the report and for DSS to develop a qualitative set of questions and about shorter term, longer term, and report back to the board about the needs. Is that clear enough for our clerk?
And that's a second.
And Supervisor Lavanino has seconded. So any further discussion?
Chair Hartman, members of the board, I'm sorry, did you also include recommendation C for CEQA?
Yes, C is what staff recommendation is what I said,
Great.
and direction according.
Thank you.
Okay. And I don't see any further discussion. So all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
And just ballpark, how long do you think it'll take to do that? Another 4 or 6 months?
Oh, not that long. This is the end of August, September, October. We will have it out before the end of September. We'll create it. I'll run it past Assistant CEO Musnisic to make sure she concurs with how the questions are asked and the totality of what's being asked. And then we'll send it out to the directors of each of these organizations. And then do follow-up prompts if we don't hear back. When I was dispersing the $200,000, we sent the RFI to all 11 providers and we didn't hear back from several of them, right? So we're not necessarily going to have responses from everybody, but we will send it out to the right people, do a follow-up prompt, and then come back and report on what responses we did get.
Well, thank you. And I think what you've given us a great description of what exists right now. And now you're trying to figure out what we need for the future. So I really appreciate all the work that goes into this. All right, turning to County Council, what's for closed session today?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. We have one in case of anticipated litigation, deciding whether to initiate civil litigation. We've got conference with labor negotiators for employee organizations, all bargaining units, unrepresented employees, managers, and executives. And the agency designated representatives are CEO Miyasato and Human Resources Director De Rivera. And conference with legal counsel existing litigation. It's Arlington versus County of Santa Barbara Superior Court case number 20 CV 03438. And the time estimate is about an hour.
So that means we're back at 11:30, but we have completed our business agenda, so the exact time is less critical. We're reconvening the meeting of August 23rd, 2022 of the Santa Barbara County Board of Supervisors here in the Santa Maria Hearing Room. County Council, will you please report out from closed session?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. The board met in closed session on 3 items. 1 item of anticipated litigation, deciding whether to initiate civil litigation, conference with labor negotiators for all bargaining units, unrepresented employees, managers, and executives. And 1 case of existing litigation, Arlington versus County of Santa Barbara, and the board took no reportable action.
Thank you. And with that, we're adjourned.
Madam
to-
Chair, we
Oh,
have a special announcement.
Okay.
Although there was no reportable action, there is some reportable action coming up next week, which is, I believe 2 of our members have birthdays. So I think we should join in singing happy birthday to our board members. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Tony and Greg. Happy birthday to you.
And with that, we are adjourned.